Learning a new language is often difficult. Imagine learning what is considered one of the hardest languages in the world and studying your entire undergraduate degree in the same language. This is what Aneka Rebecca Rajbhandari did when she moved to China to pursue her higher studies that was taught in the Chinese language. Aneka is the co-founder of the Araniko Project and the first Nepali to finish an undergraduate degree from the prestigious Peking University. When we had this conversation, she was preparing to move to China again for her master's in China studies. In this episode, we talk about the Chinese language, translation, and writing. But more than anything, this episode is filled with the wonders of what learning a new language can do to you. Thank you for tuning in to How Do You Create That? The podcast is supported by the Open Institute for Social Science. And I'm your host, Alfa.
欢迎，
谢谢，你好。
今天感觉怎么样？
我今天感觉很好，很激动。
Wow. I don't think I can speak more Chinese after that. Not more than 2 lines. Welcome, Aneka. Thank you so much for agreeing to do the podcast. And I'm so excited to be having this conversation about, Chinese language. And it just takes me back to a decade ago when I was studying the language and I was also in China. And all of this is just coming back. So I'm really, really excited.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and to talk about Chinese language in particular. And yeah, just happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Hey. So as we start, tell us something about the Araniko Project.
So the Araniko Project, I feel like this is such a big topic and I feel like I can talk about this so much because this is literally like my baby. So it's like an initiative, it's an effort, it's an attempt by me as well as my co-founder. He's also my husband, Kshatri, and we were students in Peking University back then when we thought about this. So this is our initiative to kind of bridge the knowledge gap between Nepal and China. So, I mean, can I go in a little bit about how we started?
Yeah, please.
So the Araniko Project kind of started 3-4 years ago. We thought about it when we were on campus, but it actually came into action when we got stuck here in Nepal during COVID. And during COVID, everybody was online. And naturally, when COVID was there was China involved. Whenever there's something political in Nepal, China also comes into picture. So everybody who knew us, they would ask us like how China was thinking, what China was thinking, how they look at Nepal. And so like we thought, oh wow, people are really curious about it. And there's actually no way for Nepali people or just in general to know much about China due to, number one, the Great Firewall, the internet, another firewall being Chinese language. So we thought the best way was to translate primary sources to Nepali or English. So we started off with translations, and that's what we have in our blog, but we realized that another important aspect is history. So we have a lot of historical archives and articles about Nepal-China relations. We want people to understand that history is very important to understand a country as well as the relations with the other country. So that's what the Araniko Project is. We recently registered, so we proudly call ourselves a research advisory right now, and we're hoping to move forward with a lot more works on Nepal-China relations and providing a more different angle to it than we see right now.
That sounds very interesting, and congratulations on registering the Araniko Project and all the very best for the future. So I know that you've had a lot of conversations and you've been invited to many talks about, to know about the politics and economics, about China-Nepal relations and all of that. But today we'll be doing something different. We'll talk about your writing process and most importantly, translating from the Chinese language and writing nonfiction pieces, which is what the Araniko Project is all about, like you've just explained. How did you feel when you started learning Chinese? Also, is there a difference between, when we usually say like Chinese or Mandarin Chinese?
Answering the second question first, because I feel like, Chinese is pretty vague, because in China you have, I mean, when you say Chinese, it's mainly either Mandarin, the one that most people learn, Mandarin, but there's also Cantonese. So the main difference between the two languages are that Mandarin has 5 tones when you speak, and Cantonese has 9. But then when you write down, it's the same Chinese characters, it's just a different way you read it. And Cantonese is kind of spoken towards the south of China, but then again, I mean, I'm sure you also know that there are a lot of dialect in China. So even if you say Mandarin, it might sound completely different based on the city you're in, due to the dialect. So, I mean, that's kind of the difference. So, but then, I try to be more specific, but sometimes, it's just easier to say Chinese.
Yeah.
Yeah, but by Chinese, I definitely mean Mandarin. Cantonese, I don't know when am I going to perfect it. But you did ask about how my experience was studying Chinese language, and I feel like I will not be modest about it. It was absolutely tough. Like there's no shortcut to learning language, I believe. And Chinese, I'm sure a lot of people kind of understand already how difficult it is, but especially for me, because I had that mindset that I wasn't studying language for leisure. I was studying it to be able to study in it in my undergraduate, which was Chinese taught. And I majored in political science, so I definitely had to master the language.
Wow.
And I took 2 years to completely study this language, and I personally feel like it wasn't even enough, because unlike English or even Nepali, we have a set of alphabets in Chinese language. I mean, I do not have to explain it to you, but talking to the audience, like, we have to memorize every single word, and it's insane. And like, I remember, like, about 10 years ago, there was this article on BBC, and it was just about this Chinese PhD student who forgot how to write the word sneeze in Chinese, because it's so complicated if you look at it.
Oh.
Yeah, if you actually check it out, it's so complicated. And I mean, a PhD student who can't write the character for sneeze, and so like he made headlines and it was viral.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean that's just an evidence of how tough it is, even for the Chinese people. Like, they don't realize you miss a stroke, it's another word in itself.
Absolutely.
So, frankly, it was quite tough, but I feel like there's absolutely, in Chinese, when you study Chinese, you don't question it, you just have to accept it and move forward, is what I realized. Like, you don't question, why is this grammar like this? It doesn't work that way. I feel like you just have to accept it and move on. That's at least how my Chinese teacher taught me when I was in Beijing.
I find that very interesting when you say you just have to accept it and move on. Could you elaborate that?
Sure. So, I mean, like, when we're learning Chinese, there's, it just sounds easy, like there's grammar rules and everything, but always, even in English grammar, you have like certain extra rules that like, it is like this, like there's no reason behind why it is like this. So in Chinese as well, you're just asking the teacher, why does, like, how like in Chinese law is actually like, it's used for past tense, but it's used for also continuous present tense. Wow. Yeah, there's a different way of using that. It's not used that often, but yeah, you can. But you don't question it. A lot of people ask, 为什么? Why? But then the teacher would always respond like, 没有为什么. There is no why. Like, you just try to internalize the language, because language is not something that you just study and learn. It's something that you have to feel as well. So I feel like let me just put this in. A lot of people ask me like how to start learning Chinese and all that. I feel like the best way is learning it in the country. I mean, not to discourage those who are studying here, but I still feel like you need to feel it, and that can only be felt in the country and in the society that's speaking the same language.
Wow, that's so beautifully, you said it so beautifully when you said language is something we have to feel. There's a term for that, it's called yugan, right?
Yeah.
And when I was in China, like you said, it was really hard at first. The language is like, oh my God, the strokes are all dancing on the page and it doesn't make sense. But I think feeling that language really helps. And what helped me feel that language was music, because that's something that I like personally. And yeah, like you have to feel the language. I totally agree with you. Definitely. Also, I didn't know that Cantonese does not have intonations.
As in?
Like, you had said that Cantonese language doesn't have intonation.
Oh, I meant like they don't have, like, they have 9 tones.
Oh, Cantonese have 9 tones?
Yeah. So Mandarin is 4 to 5. 5 if you count like the no tone part, some people do. But Cantonese is 9.
Oh my God, Cantonese is 9 tones?
Yes.
That already scares me.
I know, right?
Oh my god. Do you know Cantonese?
No. I don't think I can do language again.
9 tones. Oh my god, I'm already scared. Like, not to discourage anyone who wants to study Cantonese, but wow, that's like wow. That's just wow. No other word as of
Exactly,
now.
that's a lot. But it does sound a lot soothing than Mandarin, is what I believe, frankly. Yeah.
So you translate a lot of Chinese text into, and when we say Chinese, we mean Mandarin Chinese.
Yeah.
So you translate a lot of it into English, and I also think a Nepali book is coming out soon. Am I right?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Thank you.
So what was your initial experience of translating, and how did it evolve over time?
I've never been asked this question, so like it kind of like it really got me thinking just now. But translating I feel like translation, how do you say, like when you learn Chinese language especially, it's not something that you choose to do intentionally. It kind of, you happen to do it because like situation, you might have to translate for a friend like in person, or you might have to it might be the immediate job you might get as a student in the university. So it's just kind of like all roads lead to translation when you're studying Chinese. But talking about my experience, I'm more experienced in like the written version of translation. There's also the verbal translation, which I have immense respect for those who can actually do that, because that's really tough. But I mainly do written versions of it, and my experience is my experience started mainly from Peking University when I was like translating for a lot of the university related documents. So that's kind of how it started. And initially I was so slow because I would always like, overthink how to write this. And if you know Chinese language, like, you know that there's no space. So you need to know where the one word ends and where the other begins. And words are not just like 1 or 2 characters. It could be 4 characters like Chongyu, right? So you kind of have to understand which one is the actual word, or where is it starting, where is it ending. That's something I never realized until I started doing translations as well. Plus you also have to know the mood of the translation, or what it's trying to convey, because there are like certain words that may have like a denotation or something. So you kind of have to understand who you're targeting and what's the message it's giving. So that's kind of the tough part about the translation. I mean, that was more towards when I was working in that. But talking about the book, yeah, it's kind of it's literally the first time like me and Ronald, we translated together. We took up this project because we were kind of curious about how it would work. So we took a great amount of time. I won't even lie about it, because it was our first time and we wanted to take it slow. It was translating from Chinese to Nepali. And the book is about, I mean, I won't give out much, but I mean, it is in Chinese, but it will come in Nepali eventually. In Chinese, it's Wang Dao. In Nepali, it has been translated to Margo Codes. And it's about, because it's pretty personal to us being from Peking University. It's about the revolutionaries that came out of Peking universities as well, university. Mm-hmm. And they were also the founding fathers. They were all men, fathers of the Communist Party of China, as well as the today's People's Republic of China. So it's pretty much about the revolutionary days and how things turned out to be. So it was quite interesting to, translate as well as read it at the same time, and also learn of new words. But the main challenge was translating a lot of the Chinese words that they're very rooted to Chinese, how do you say, philosophy and history, that to Nepali. Like, yeah. You know how like in Nepali we don't know how to translate juto to English, right? So there's a lot of words like that.
There's no equivalent. It's hard to explain. That's probably a challenge every translator comes to, that, you cannot completely translate one language to another. They say, I read this like many years ago, that poetry gets lost in translation. And I didn't realize that till I also started translating. Now, I don't translate as well as you do. And no, I'm not translating books at all. I like translating Chinese songs into English. It's just something that I do for
It's a great way to practice Chinese.
Yeah, I enjoy Chinese pop songs a lot. So it's just something that I do on the side. And I think that's when I realized that, oh, this means something in this language, but there's no equivalent to it. I don't know how to translate it,
Exactly.
you know? And you feel like, I think you also understand the beauty of language. Because you
Exactly.
can't pull all of that, you have to, appreciate what is there
exactly,
in the
not
original form.
that's where what you mean by yugan. Like
Yeah.
you feel it, you feel the language, but you can't translate it.
It's just there. It's a feeling. It's in your bones. Wow.
Yes.
Too literal.
Definitely.
So you just mentioned that you translated from Chinese to Nepali. And a very good friend of mine who's Chinese, had asked me to translate, like share a few lines in Nepali to share with her students, who are like Nepali students studying Chinese. And she sent me these few lines that she wanted me to tell in Nepali. And she sent me in Chinese. And then for 2 seconds, I was lost. Because my way of learning Chinese was through English as the supporting language. And when she asked me to kind of give me that equivalent in Nepali, I was like, okay, I have to first translate this into English and then into Nepali. So do you have that feeling as well, when translating from Chinese to English or Chinese to Nepali? Did you have something, a similar feeling, or maybe something totally different?
True. I mean, that's definitely an issue, especially when you're multilingual, right? Because you don't know which language you think in. But quite honestly, for me, I definitely taught a lot in English, to be fair. I mean, like, the teacher would also initially teach you in English. So it's natural that you would also think in English before, especially in the initial days. And so I feel like when learning Chinese also, I would, like, translate it in my head first and then, like, interpret it. But then I realized that you can also think in Nepali because a lot of the grammar structure actually matches with Nepali.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I cannot immediately give you an example because my mind
Yeah,
just
that's
went
fine,
blank.
no problem.
But if you like personally even think about a lot of like sentences in Chinese and you think it actually works out in Nepali. So I learned that I have these two superpowers. I can use Nepali as well as English to try to understand. But then again, I also realized that that's not the right way of learning a language because that way you're not translating it authentically. You're translating it in a different like language structure, right? So there are certain rules and when you're still translating in Chinese language or you're using Chinese, a lot of, for example, like date and time is usually put in the front when you're in Chinese. Usually say the time and date and then you continue the sentence. So I mean, but in English it flows both ways, right? So stuff like that. So you still have to be mindful that your sentence that is translating to Chinese shouldn't look exactly like the sentence that the original sentence, at least in the structure.
Oh, okay.
So that's exactly where people would realize that, you've used Google Translate or you've directly translated it. That's where you're caught.
That's where the AI fails?
Yes,
if we can say that.
That is in fact where the AI fails. I kind of tried that in ChatGPT as well, and I think they also fall for it apparently.
Oh, so they just do the
direct translation.
It's like
exactly
this, and like the AI probably doesn't know that language has its own feeling.
Yeah, its own feeling. There's no yuga.
There's no yuga. Yeah, you have to feel the language. Oh my god.
Definitely. So it's very easy to identify that error for sure. Yeah, so that code switching is definitely an issue sometimes, especially, I don't know if you also did it, but when we were initially learning Chinese language, especially in China, because it's so easy to pick it up fast, right? Like you learn something in class, especially in your initial days, and you use it immediately after, once you get out of class, going to the library or the 食堂, because it's so easy to say, I'm going to the 食堂, which is the canteen. Right? And then you don't realize that, you just mix Chinese. But it's a lot easier to say 食堂 than the canteen. I don't know if you felt that way, but it felt a lot like that for me. I would just casually with my friends, I'm going to the 图书馆 to get some books, and then later I'm gonna go talk to 老师. It's not teacher like 老师.
You mean mixing English and Chinese?
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like I use that a lot with nouns. That happened to me, and I wasn't the only one because our entire class was doing that at one point. So I feel like it's a kind of a phenomenon. I don't know if you felt that way as well. So,
We mix a lot of Nepali and English, which is called code mixing.
It does, and I feel
linguistic
like
terms.
it comes from being a very bilingual, like multilingual. Sorry, because I would like whenever I visited Nepal when I was in China, like I would add that ba in the end, like, because it's a very polite way of speaking. Like,你吃饭了吧? Like you eat like food, but it's like a very suggestive and a polite way. And I would use that ba when I was speaking English or Nepali too, and I would just mess with my head.
That just reminded me. I was having a conversation with a group of friends like some time back, and we were talking about language. We were also talking about, like, my friends are educators, and we're talking about education system and courses in general. And suddenly, I wanted to say something. There was a word that I wanted to describe, and like it came to me in Chinese, and I was like, "Oh no!" that was probably one of the first times that I've consciously realized that, oh wow, I know this term in Chinese, but I have to think about, okay, what is it in, like,
I feel you.
Nepali,
that happens a lot.
Which is very interesting.
Yeah.
You have written a beautiful piece titled "Tracing Nepal's Cultural History in Beijing," which is a long-form essay, and which I think anyone visiting Beijing, especially a Nepali person visiting Beijing, can use as a tour map. And I'm definitely going to do it the next time I get to be there. I was just wondering, how did that piece come to be? What was the research process like? Did you have to do translations? And, beyond that essay, how do you usually pick themes for essays to write?
So that piece is pretty dear to me because it took me quite a while to be able to come up with that piece. And I feel like it's still short. Short in the sense that there is still more that you can write about the Nepali history in Beijing. But before that, I really want to put it out there. I personally feel like, Beijing might, if you look at the map, Beijing might seem like a small city, but if you're inside, it's actually massive. Like, I lived there for good 4.5 years. Not counting the COVID years. And I feel like I wasn't able to explore most of it. Like, if you just take the last subway to the last stop, you really literally reach the forest or something. Like,
Wow.
It's literally not just a concrete jungle in itself. I'm just saying Beijing is massive, and there's a lot of Nepal presence in it. And I would personally argue that Nepal probably has the most historical footprint in all of South Asia, but in Beijing. So, and that's kind of a little attempt that I made with this brief article, and I feel like there could be a longer list than what I've provided. Like, just briefly going through it, I've mentioned about Miaowing Temple, which holds the white dagoba built by Araniko during the 13th century. This was the Yuan dynasty, and that's. I feel like a lot of people, usually even Chinese people, they know about the White Stupa because it's literally the only standing 13th century architecture in Beijing. And it literally contributes to the cultural aesthetic of the city. You literally have a White Stupa among the concrete skyscrapers. It's just so beautiful if you see from a top, right? But then a lot of people don't go inside there because the view is better from outside, right?
Oh.
So things like that. And I feel like it's in our side to create that awareness, to let people know that, it's actually built by a Nepali. There's a Nepali footprint over here. Thank God there is a statue inside that people can actually see that, it was actually a Nepali artist who is responsible for this
Araniko statue.
Yeah, I'm glad that that's there. But besides that, we've also talked about the Lama Temple, right? Have you visited the Lama Temple?
No, I didn't stay in Beijing. I was in Shijiazhuang.
Oh, that's pretty far.
Yeah, that's like close to Beijing, but then I wasn't there, so I was not in Beijing. And I also didn't know about the White Temple when I was in China. So that was like, wow, I wasn't aware, so I'm really grateful for the pieces that you and the Araniko Project are writing.
We're also really glad that we can put that out there, frankly. And we want to do more on this. We do have the name Araniko in it, but we are still yet to find Araniko, to be honest. And there's so many stories about it. So I'm going back to Beijing for 2 years, and I'm really excited to explore more than what I have from Nepal. I'm sure there's going to be more out there for me to explore. But then coming back to this piece, I did have to read a lot of like historical text as well. And I mean, just explaining a little bit, Mandarin is not enough to navigate Chinese history, because like the Chinese we know today, like the Mandarin Chinese we know today, is very different from the ancient Chinese. There's traditional, there's classical Chinese, and the present-day Chinese. Frankly, I did study a little bit of classical Chinese because I needed it for my entrance exam. But that's just it. I couldn't give it much time because, as you know, language requires a lot of patience and time that you have to invest. And that's literally the only thing you have to do for language. You can't be doing it part-time, is personally what I believe. It's especially to specialize in it. And so like history requires a lot of like that knowledge, that level of language. So I mean, I really hope I can, make it through, get some more history out of it. So for this piece, like I did have to put in a lot of effort, and I pretty much became like a digital archivist or like digital archaeologist, to be specific, to able to like find out these information. Yeah.
It's like a rabbit hole, isn't it?
It is a rabbit hole.
You get lost.
Too many rabbit holes, to be honest. You jump into one and then you go deeper.
And then there is a universe that you
multiverse.
Didn't know. Multiverse, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so so we're hoping to like bring in more historical information out there, and maybe even continue this article that you just mentioned and add in a more like elaborated list, perhaps, hopefully.
When you were researching for this very piece, were there moments when you got stuck? Like it could be with like challenges with language, or it could just be like, like everybody gets, like you're doing a project, you're writing something, and at first you have a lot of motivation. Yes, I'm gonna write this, but suddenly it just goes down, like diminishing marginal utility sets in.
Yes.
How do you keep up with that? Or, when you hit a challenge as a translator, like if you can't find an equivalent for a particular word that is rooted in a particular culture,
Yeah, I mean, it's not just this, not just this article in specifically, because I feel like I pretty much really enjoyed this experience. But talking about the pieces on our blog, you do reach a roadblock at times, because I have a lot of these, how do you say, like, because I'm constantly digging about exchanges on Nepal-China's history, like from the dynasty period to like PRC establishment, like People's Republic of China. But there are like these very brief information, like I do get like 5-6 lines of something, and that's just it. And then I have to like search keywords, like look throughout the internet, go down multiple rabbit holes, but you still just get the same thing. And it's so tough. You just feel like, is it even worth putting this out there? Maybe I can like search more about it. So I put it off for a while, and then I find something else, and I get engaged in that, and I forget the other one. It happens all the time. And like you mentioned before, like how do you choose these themes to what to write about? And that's where the sad part is. In Nepal, you don't have anyone else writing something like this. So I'm literally pretty much the only one who's writing such historical information about Nepal-China. I mean, there might be out there, but consistently, I think I'm the only one. Is at least what I've observed. So I feel like you don't really, whatever is out there, everything is new. You don't really have to choose what. Yeah, and like things like history is something that's once you put it out there, you claim it. Like you've written about it already. It's not an opinion piece that it can be both right or wrong or something like that. You can anyone can write about it. So so this is kind of like, it is very challenging till date. Like every single piece I've written out there, it's like, frankly, putting it out there, it's not sponsored or funded by anything. It's purely out of interest. So that's why like I literally dig out everything, open multiple tabs out there, and I'm just translating and putting information, whatever is relevant. So yeah. It's such a long march for me to create a piece.
It's the feeling, isn't it?
It is such a great feeling, though. Yeah, you feel rich with all these archives and information in your head.
Absolutely. I mean, I read a couple of pieces on the Araniko Project's blog, and there's so much. And I can see that there's so much effort you and your entire team have kept, behind it. It's like, yeah, I know it's a lot of work, researching and writing. It's not easy. It's a humongous task, and it has to come from the bones, the feeling.
It does.
Now, you often co-write with Raunab, co-founder of the Araniko Project, also your husband, like you mentioned at the start, and you also co-wrote the piece that we just talked about. So how does this process of co-writing, a piece or essay, multiple essays, work for you? Because frankly, I have never co-written anything with anyone, except maybe the, report assignments in college and school where you're like, you do the introduction, I will do point 1, and then somebody else does point 2, and somebody does like thank you in conclusion. And for me, writing has always been a one-person thing. The closest co-writing that I've ever done was writing an exhibition statement for an exhibition like I was part of after a residency, and we were 2 writers, and we had to come up with like one exhibition statement, and like we were already hitting roadblocks, so we were like, okay, there are 2 paragraphs, you write first paragraph, I write second paragraph. So I'm very curious, how does co-writing work for you?
That's I like this question, actually. Like, nobody has asked me this, but I think it's a genuine thing, because some people cannot co-write, right? It's like some people are like lone rangers, some people like working in a team, right? So for me, like, it's not like I can co-write with everyone. I only co-write with those I trust, or like those people I know. So haven't only written with like Rona, I've also written with a couple of friends before, like an article. There's actually another article about Chinese students learning Nepali language. I co-wrote with Suniva, who's also a really a good friend. So like I think I personally can only write with people I trust and I know. So that way I know that they're not exploiting me, or like we don't, or at least our work is divided properly. But of course, how it works is that, especially when I have written a lot of pieces with Ronald, so in this context, like, usually our game plan is that I do a lot of the Chinese translation part, because naturally my expertise lie there. So I do a lot of translate. I translate a bunch of like notes out there, and then we refine it to what we need more specifically from the translated note. And then I pretty much like, we work on a skeleton. Like, he writes in his own language, I write on my own. Like, of course it has to eventually it has to be like the same language, right? But he just writes on his own, I write it on my own. And I usually end up writing more, because I feel like I'm very bad at concising things, making it more to the point. I tend to write too much because I feel like I want to include everything. Everything's so interesting. But that's kind of my weakness, to be honest. And that's when Ronald comes in. Like, after he finishes his writing part, he's the one who kind of concises it and makes it more like presentable. And he's the one who adds more like the data, the statistics, and all the more dates and everything. I feel like he's the one who like does a touch up who does it better. So we both write, but he's the one who like ends up beautifying things and making it look like the final piece that you see today. And I'm the one who adds in too much details out there and does more of the translation part. So we have that pretty much work division. And if it's not for this, I don't think I can really write with anyone else, frankly.
Oh, so it's like a complementary set of skills.
Literally, yes.
You have something, and somebody you're co-writing with has something else, and then you add it up together. So it's like, it's a teamwork, basically.
It is definitely a teamwork.
There's a joke in academia for research papers, like someone, and et al., and the someone writes everything, and then everybody else they're just like winging it. There are memes as well.
Yeah, I'm sure there is, and that's exactly what I'm scared about when co-writing anything, because because I know I'm very serious, because I will most likely take all the responsibility. I feel like I'm a little bit of a perfectionist too, but I kind of want to include everything, and I tend, if someone is not working properly, I will probably do everything, but yeah, and I kind of but it will hurt, right? It'll feel unfair to myself, but I'll still finish everything. So it's kind of, that's why I feel I'm very mindful of who I work with, especially when I'm co-writing a piece.
It's like trust fall, like you fall.
Yes.
Writing is like
that's a great
together.
Analogy.
Yeah. It's similar, isn't it? Because you are sharing ideas and how things are going to work. And of course, there might be disagreements, which is natural in any team activity you do. So, of course, there's also reconciliation. How do you manage that conflict and differences of opinions and perspective?
Definitely.
And that's a lot of work.
It is, it is. That's why you definitely have to work with someone who you kind of agree with. Of course, there are healthy arguments, but yeah, it always works out when you know each other.
That's true. I think a book, I've not read it yet, but Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett often write books together.
Mm-hmm.
They've written, so I'm guessing maybe they're very good friends as well. Because, you need that trust and support to write together, like even just to share ideas.
Definitely,
like writing
definitely.
Is
And
next
it's
step.
and an interesting part of like especially Ronald and me is that he comes from a very econ field, like business econ management. I studied political science, and I definitely have that interest towards politics. And I am also like my master's is going to be about more Chinese politics. But we come together for themes like history and culture, society. So it's our hobby, it's our interest that brings us together, apart from our own main field of study. So I feel like that's kind of nice. That I like this bonding that we have.
That's true, and you can also bounce off ideas with each other. Like
True.
sometimes you feel very alone writing all by yourself, and like even if you're not co-writing, just having a community of people you can share ideas with is so
True.
important. And
I agree for sure.
what got you interested in like studying your undergrad in Chinese language?
I really like this question that I get asked about why I chose China, and especially political science. And the reason being is that, during high school, I used to I saw every one of my classmates applying, especially to the US or Australia. And I always thought that maybe at least back then, I should probably join the herd. That's probably the right decision. But I was never my parents knew that I never wanted to really settle outside of Nepal. So usually that's what ends up happening. And I didn't want to really leave or go very far from Nepal. So my father suggested I look north. He used to work in the UN, so he had traveled to Beijing a lot, and he had seen the development of China, or especially through Beijing, throughout an entire decade. And he suggested that the future is China. So if you want to stay in Asia or you want to stay in Nepal, I don't think there's a better country to go to than China. And so, all thanks to him, I started considering that option at all. But of course, I was really intimidated by the fact that I had to learn my major in Mandarin. It took me an entire week to come into terms with the possibility of me being able to do that. I had lost all hope learning that. But I started talking to other students who had done it, and I was like, if they can do it, then why not? Why can't I? So, but only to realize that I was actually the first Nepali from Peking University, undergraduate. So,
Ooh.
yeah, it's kind of funny because I was so delusioned, but that delusion helped me get through, only to realize in the end. But anyway, that worked out. The reason I chose political science particularly is I was actually interested in international relations. But I feel like in undergraduate you have to start from the foundations. The foundation is always political science, and studying, and regardless of what you say about China, it is definitely very political. And if you have to understand today's China, at least you have to understand the Chinese Communist Party, and you have to understand Chinese politics. So that's kind of why I wanted to also study Chinese politics, especially in the country and with their perspective, and what better way study it in Mandarin with, the toppers of the country. And it was amazing, learning their perspective and everything. So that's kind of why I studied China. Lastly, because of language, because us Nepali, we usually can understand Hindi, right? And then we have English, we have Nepali, and now if we have Mandarin, then we can navigate with half of the world's population. So why not?
Whoa. Wow. I can't imagine studying my undergrad or any degree in Mandarin. I feel like it's a challenge, but I'm sure you're glad you took up that challenge, when you look back at it now, how do you feel about the language? Because that was very intimidating at first, which it is for a lot of new learners of Chinese and Mandarin. But when you look back at it now, after all these years, how do you feel your relationship with the Chinese language has evolved?
Wow, I really love this question because like looking back, frankly, I'm gonna be really honest, like it was very intimidating. Like all my entire, even after getting into university, like undergraduate, after all that struggle of learning language and then getting into undergraduate, it's not like things got any better. It was even more. It was tougher, because then you're literally, HSK6 is really nothing for someone who has to now study with like native speakers. And I mean, I vividly remember that time when I was in my first class with Chinese students. On my laptop, I had my Word document open, like to type notes. The moment the professor started speaking, everybody started typing out every single word the professor said in Chinese. And I was just, the sound of everyone typing got me so intimidated, I froze for 5 minutes. But then, yeah, but the only, and then there's this one word that always sticks with me. I mean, it's just a simple word. It's 坚持, which means persistence. And that's something that my Chinese teacher taught me way ahead when we were learning Chinese. If it's not for persistence, like you can never get through China, or you're studying your studies over here. So frank, it was so tough. Looking back right now, I will never be like, I'm not gonna be modest. Like it was, like I had such a difficult time as well navigating, because it's not just language. You also have to navigate relations, right, with your professor, with your friends, classmates, and everybody. I mean, it's such a competitive world out there in China. If there's a stereotype about Asians being competitive, those Asians are Chinese for sure. And I feel like I felt that in person in itself. But my relationship with Chinese language, I feel like has definitely evolved. Like I definitely enjoyed it more when I was not using it in a more like education backdrop, like especially like in class, because then I would felt like I was fighting it, because I was trying to understand it so hard, and I was putting too much pressure on myself. But I absolutely like cherished it and loved it when I was like studying literature or poetry, and it was completely, I felt like I was just like hugging it. And I was just it just felt so much better, like. And then I felt like I realized the beauty of language. And finally, translating a lot of the stuff like historical archives or whatever is out there, it happened completely like under my interest. That's why I feel like I eventually like learned to also love the language. So I mean, there was a part where I hated it, but I eventually like loved it. I do still love it, because now I feel like I have the language pretty much under my control, and I know how to navigate new words and know how to understand it better.
I love the word, the Mandarin word that you said, 坚持. I think that's the thing about like studying like Chinese language. And because that's the same thing that happened with me. When I went to China, I had no idea. Like I'd gone there to study language for a year. And when I opened the textbook, I was like, oh my, I don't know what these strokes are. It's so scary. But then you persist, and then it goes on. Like you said, the intimidating moment when everybody started typing. My intimidating moment was like dictation. 听写, right?
Yes.
I was so bad at it. I would like, maybe there'd be 20 words and I'd barely get like, I'd barely get half, That was how it started. And then by the end, I started appreciating, and I also started scoring better, and I also got used to the language. And I think also music was there, which helped me like, find a way through the language. But it's just beautiful at the end of the day, I think. And
I agree. Thanks, yeah. That brings back a lot of trauma, I honestly.
Oh no.
I mean, but I feel like it's a very effective way. Looking back now, it's a very effective way too, because like I mentioned earlier, you have to memorize every single word. It's literally maths. It's memorizing formulas, right? Like you cannot miss a single stroke, you can't miss a single word or number or anything. So yeah, like Tingxie was pretty much the best way, the most forceful way, but it worked. It works.
It works. It definitely works. And if you persist, I think we get to the beauty of the language. It gets worse before it gets better.
Yes, yes, I'm glad that the worst part comes first, and you eventually like understand the beauty of it.
Yeah, it's a very visual language. Like the strokes, all of them have stories, the characters.
You know what's interesting about Chinese language, like compared to English language? I mean, in English, even if we don't know a word, we can at least read it, right? But in Chinese, like if you don't know a word, you can't read it, but you can probably understand what it might mean
Yeah.
because of the character structure. You know, it's divided into two parts, right? There's the radical in a character, and then there's like the actual a character, the part that creates its pronunciation. So the radical is basically like it expresses what the word the character might mean. Like for water, there's the
Yeah,
droplets, right?
The tree.
Yeah,
I was just thinking about that.
Exactly. So if there is a word that you don't know but has like droplets, it's probably related to water. At least you can guess that, but you probably can't read it.
Yeah, don't know what that means, but you can maybe guess
Yeah.
from the pictorial nature of. Yes. So I went to China again in 2015 for the Chinese bridge, and I bought like 2 books in Chinese. One is a novel, and the other is it's like musing. You know, it's about life and love, and it's all in like Mandarin, all in characters. And I really, really would like to read it, but it's like, oh my, it's probably gonna take some time to be able to do that. Like when you were mentioning how you love the language when you're reading like literature and poetry, and I'm like, wow, you know, I'd love to do that.
Yeah.
It'd be so beautiful.
That's you literally sitting down and literally searching up every single word, right?
Yes, exactly.
It still happens.
But that's like you said in our conversation, language is all about patience. And I think that also grounds us in many ways, that you can't force it. You have to give time, and you have to probably like, keep checking each character until it stamps in your memory, and then you remember, oh, this is what it is. It's so much of persistence, so much of patience.
It is. That I lived by one rule, like when I was studying Chinese, is that the moment I see a character I don't know, I'm going to search it up immediately. I will not procrastinate on searching up a character. That is something, a rule that I lived by, and I feel like it still works, because then you're like, oh, I'm going to search it up later, and then you won't. You really won't. But it's worth learning every single character out there, because you'll come across it eventually.
Yeah, you might not. That's such a good point, because I watch Chinese dramas, and I love the martial arts and the fantasy one, you know, the wuxia and xianxia dramas, and there's so many words I come across, and I just check it and like, oh, this is what it means, but I've not kept a record of it, so yeah, mental note.
At least
keep
like,
a record.
at least you made that effort. You know, when you come across it again, you'll be like, oh yeah, I've seen you before.
But I don't know if I'm gonna remember it. Not sure if I'll remember it. I think this is a good time to go to the rapid fire.
Okay, I'm excited.
How do you feel about the rapid fire?
A little nervous, actually.
Okay. Do you have a Chinese equivalent for your name? What does it mean? Can you like spell it out for us?
Oh my god. My name Aneka, like frankly, I even don't know the meaning behind Aneka, like in English or even in any other language. My father found it beautiful, so he kept it. I mean, so I don't think there's an equivalent for it in Chinese, but quickly out there, like in Chinese, my name is Araniko, which I am very not proud of, because it's something that like the university administration just gave it to me based on how Aneka sounds like. So it really has no meaning to it. So I'm really down to have like a new name or a more Chinese, a proper Chinese name in the future. Because Aneka, if you break it down like every single character, it's so embarrassing, which I don't want to talk about.
Oh no! Did I ask the wrong question?
No, you didn't, but it's okay.
Do you have a favorite word or character in Chinese?
Ooh, I think we just mentioned, like, I really stick by, like, the word 坚持. But then there's actually a saying that I stick by as well. And it's by Lao Tzu. And it is, like, 千里之行，始于足下. Do you know that? It means
No.
like, no, it's basically, it's a very common one. It's like 1,000 mile begins with a single step.
Yes.
So I always stick by it, because I mean, Chinese language has really humbled me. So I feel like, yeah, I'm really down for all the hard work. And yeah, this is just one of the idioms I live by.
That's a very famous quote, isn't it? The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a
Yes.
single step. And you just gave us the OG version. Can you say that in Chinese once
Oh my
again?
god. 千里之行，始于足下.
Wow. I have no idea. I mean, I need to practice my Chinese.
It's okay.
Mental note. But that's such a... Yeah, it's a very famous, like Lao Tzu's famous saying.
Yeah.
Did you know how to use chopsticks when you landed in China, or did you have to learn it afterwards?
I did, actually. Fun fact, I was born in Thailand. So,
Oh.
yeah, I lived there for 11 years before I felt like an identity crisis when I came to Nepal. But anyway, I'm Nepali. My citizenship is Nepali, just to be clear out there. But so I learned like chopsticks when I was really small anyway. So chopsticks, yeah, wasn't really a trouble in China.
Well, it was a big challenge for me, but I learned eventually, and like I sometimes miss eating with chopsticks.
Proud of you.
Oh.
Yeah.
Talking about chopsticks, name 3 Chinese food that you like.
That's an insult.
Oh, I know 3 isn't enough, but
Exactly. I
we'll
mean,
just go with 3 for now.
okay, yeah, no problem. Because I mean, if China is massive and they have like 8 different kind of like they've categorized Chinese food into 8 different kinds. And I mean, when we say Chinese food in Nepal, it's usually Sichuan food. And I mean, considering my palate, I love spicy food. So like Sichuan palate is definitely my palate. So I'm definitely going to be naming those Sichuan food. So number 1 in the list is definitely like, I don't know if you've had like malasyanggo.
Yes, I love malasyanggo.
I don't know how to translate it. It's like, it's dry hot pot.
Yeah,
I believe you can say it's basically, you can understand hot pot masala, right? But then like fried in a fried version,
mode.
right? I absolutely love that. And number 2 is another Sichuan dish, which is malatang.
Same here, oh my god.
It's perfect on a rainy day.
Yes.
But it's like the soup version of it. If you're sick, it's the perfect go-to food. And then you add peanut sauce to it. It's amazing. And I mean, I can't believe I have to choose again. But like, for the third one, I guess I have to go with a hot pot. Everything is just mala right now. But yeah, like I can just, it's so bad for the stomach. But yeah, I'm so down for it.
So my university had a underground shopping mall kind of thing, and I discovered malathang there, and I was like, oh my god.
It's amazing the fact that you can choose your own veggies and meat, and they make it for you. It's just it's quite an experience that I feel like I wish Nepal really had like that as well. It's so surprising how it hasn't reached Nepal. I mean, hot pot has everywhere, but malathang and malasyanggo is like
Still hasn't.
it has to make it here.
Yeah, maybe you can bring some when you come back.
Okay, I will.
I also love the different kind of tofus that are there. Oh my god, range of tofus.
I more specifically the enoki, the one with like the strands.
The long strands?
Yes. Like
Yeah, I think I think we're both thinking about the same one.
yeah. Just sorry. I think I mentioned mushroom instead. Tofu is like I love the flat ones, like the skin.
The
Tofu.
yeah.
Sorry, I meant mushroom. Sorry.
But yeah, mushrooms are good. Oh my god.
Lot of variety.
Oh my god. I want to eat now.
I hope to see you in Beijing.
Oh my, manifesting. Like
Yes.
a lot of our guests on the podcast have manifested things. So yeah, maybe I will forget to manifest.
Okay, I'm manifesting for you.
Oh, thank you so much. And since we're talking about food, a special shout out to our snack partner, Palcha Newari Kitchen, for the yummy snacks that they've sent us. Visit them at Javlak Hill for Newari cuisine and their most popular spiral potato. So back to the rapid fire. 3 books about China that you'd recommend we read.
There's actually a lot of books, but I mean, again, like it's so difficult to just say like these books, but like I'm just gonna go on with the books that I can think about right now. But something that tops the list for me is there's this book called China in 10 Words by Yu Hua. Yu Hua is he's kind of a dark writer. Like his novels are a bit dark. I mean, he writes fiction as well, but I mean, non-fiction. I mean, the China in 10 Words is about his personal experience in China, and he has described China in literally 10 words, which is each of his chapters.
Oh.
It's a bit of a dark comedy, and it's kind of funny, but as well as dark at the same time. But I really, really recommend everyone who wants a brief insight on China, and especially from his angle. So that's definitely number one. The number two, I think I'll go a little contemporary and talk about Lucian.
Yeah,
He's a contemporary literature genius, I believe, and he has a lot of books. But one of my personal favorite is Diary of a Madman. I don't know if have you read it, or I'm sure
No.
everyone. If you search his books, then like one of the first books that will come up is the Diary of a Madman, and it's very long story short. It's about it's kind of the theme is about like the whole feudal mindset that people had back then, and he has kind of like made it look like a kind of as cannibalism. So there's this guy, Madman, who is like paranoid about everybody, thinking that everybody wants to eat him. But
It's a metaphor.
it is a metaphor, but you have to understand the deep meaning of it, how like traditional values in society. You also have to understand the backdrop when you're reading these books about China, because back then they were trying to, you know, liberalize China, make it more progressive. So that was the theme of the story. Another book that I can immediately think of right now is Sparks. It's something that I'm reading right now.
Sparks
it's like
by?
Ian Johnson. By Ian Johnson. He's a writer. He's also a journalist. So he stayed in China for a significant time, and this is a very recent book. I think it came out this year. It's about underground historians of China, and this is one book that I have read the slowest, because it's been like good 2 months, and I'm still not even halfway, because I've been highlighting so much, reading so much about a lot of like part of history in China. So Sparks is I personally I feel like I'm going to enjoy it, so I'm taking it slow.
What's a memory that you are really fond of about like your time in China? Now that you're going back again, maybe you can relive it in a different way.
Memory of wow. There's it just feels like that's such a big question, because I need to like
There's probably a lot of memories, aren't there?
Yeah, a lot of memories there. But well, among the lot of memories, there's actually this one memory that I want to live in. This is not my own memory, but I have a really, really good friend, Janisha, and you did meet her too.
Yeah.
Like Janisha Maharajan, and we studied Chinese language together, and we've been through the roughest times, especially when we were learning Chinese, because of the anxiety, the pressure, and everything. But then amid all of that, like, we always had our moments and weekends where we would like try to go to different places. Like, we'd still, regardless of all the pressure, we'd make time on a Saturday to just go shopping, or probably go to another part, because when the university, Beijing Language and Culture University, which we were in, is very far from like the main attractions of Beijing, when you say Beijing. So we'd make that effort every weekend to go somewhere, and that just happened for the 4 years while like we were studying there. And I feel like COVID messed a lot of things, and that's something that I want to do again with her, because it just like, regardless of all the pressure, that one Saturday made us so happy. I mean, we'd be so tired when we would be dragging ourselves back to university, but yeah, that's one of my fondest memory.
Oh, that's so sweet, because for me too, I think some of my fondest memories of my time in China has to do with people, has to do with friendships, and has to do with how language can all combine us together, and that we're all human at the end.
Yes.
And language is just, a tool to connect with people. And I think that's such a beautiful memory to end the rapid fire, and also a beautiful memory to remind us that, language, we're all human, and we all want to, know each other. We all have the same problems, and like, language is one of the tools that helps us communicate and, find that universal belongingness that we have as humans. Thank you so much, Aneka, for joining me. It was such a lovely conversation. I totally enjoyed it.
I definitely enjoyed it too. It's so refreshing talking about Chinese language, China, from a very different angle than I usually talk about. So, thank you so much for having me here. Like, I'm just so happy talking about Chinese literature and everything.